So we're going to have a look at dynamic blocks today. We're firstly going to have a look at one of the blocks that's provided with AutoCAD just to see how it's created or how it's set up. And then we're going to actually create a couple of objects in AutoCAD using dynamics or the dynamic criteria. So with the, next page. So with dynamic blocks, with normal blocks, we only have a single control over a block. We've got an insertion point, and that's really the only control we have with a conventional block. When we create dynamic blocks, we can add additional grips to a block. If you have a look on the right side of the screen at the moment, you can see some blue grips on screen. These are additional blocks or additional grips that have been added to the block to allow additional controls. So one dynamic block can actually represent multiple configurations of a single block. We're going to look at this particular file in a short while, and we'll have a look at the breakdown of it. So continuing on with that, when we're editing a block in AutoCAD, we use the block editor. We've used the block editor for conventional blocks, and we also use it for dynamic blocks. So we should all be fairly familiar with the block editor if we've dealt with blocks previously. When we open the block editor, we're presented with a palette. That palette is displayed on screen at the moment, and it's called the block authoring palette. That palette has all the controls, or pretty much all the controls that we need to make a block dynamic. So having said that, we're just going to have a look at a dynamic block. So I'm just going to open up my AutoCAD. So I've brought this block in from our tool palettes. So I'm just going to bring up my tool palettes here. And I've just brought this particular file in from the tool palette, and that's this one here. If we click on this block here, we have all these grips. These are additional grips. I've also replicated the same thing over here on the right-hand side panel by creating a single block, and you'll see it has a single grip. Below that, I've actually broken down the components of the block here. With the dynamic block, we've got a rotate option here, so we can rotate, and you'll see that the text stays horizontal. We've also got a button here, which is a flip button, which allows us to flip the dynamic block. And we've also got a visibility state here, which allows us to turn this flag on or off. So I'm just going to turn that one back on. To display the grips, we just have to click on the block and it will show those grips. You'll see that we've got a stretch happening here, and that allows us to stretch. With the conventional block over here on the right-hand side, when we rotate, the whole thing rotates. We have no controls over each of the items. To replicate the behavior of this over here, we would need to build up a block or different objects. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to bring this across. Just going to bring that to the center. Just going to bring this one up to this line here. And then I'm going to place this one on the end of the line. So to replicate the dynamic block, we would have to have 4 different items in our drawing. If we were to rotate this now, rotate, you'll see that the whole thing rotates. We would have to select these options, these things here, and then rotate these separately to replicate the block over here. And then we'd also have to stretch this across. Okay, so there's multiple steps that would need to be made with a dynamic block. So what I'm going to show you now is with a drawing, we're going to create a driveway or a crossover, and we're going to add dynamics to this block. With the crossover, we want to change the width. So the crossover width over here, we want to change the width. So we're going to use a stretch command in the block editor. We also want to stretch upwards. So you can see we've got the double arrow here. So we want to stretch in this direction. This one here, we're going to stretch in this direction. And we've also got the curve down here that we're going to stretch downwards. We've got an insertion point in here. And we also want to flip the crossover if we're on a property boundary. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to go into AutoCAD and we're going to open up a drawing. This drawing replicates the image that we just had on screen. I'm just going to get rid of some of this text out of here, and I'm going to convert this into a block. So I'll just erase those. Our insertion point is down there. It's fairly straightforward. So here we have separate objects in here. If I create a block of this, so I'm just going to use the block command, or I could go insert and create block. So we create a block the same way, no matter whether it is going to be dynamic or a conventional block. This one I'm just going to call crossover. Going to specify a base point and the objects. I'm not going to be concerned about the other entries here. At the moment, I'm just going to click on OK. My base point is going to be that intersection here, and I'm going to click on the block. This has now created this as a block. You'll see that if I move it around, there's only one control on it. So in reality, we want to be able to stretch this line upwards. We want to be able to stretch this across. So we're going to stretch upwards here. We want to stretch across through there, and we also want to stretch down using this. To do so, we're going to edit this block and we're going to make it into a dynamic block. The command to edit a block is bedit. However, if we click on a block, right-click, we will see that we have options in here. We've got reset block, we've got block editor, and we've got edit block in place. We want to click on block editor, and that will bring up the block editor interface. When we click on the block editor interface, we'll also be presented with this tool palette here. This tool palette is broken up into three panels. We've got three tabs. We've got parameters and we've got actions. We need a parameter. So we need like a linear parameter, and then we add an action to that parameter. So we firstly add a parameter, then we add an action. Or if we have a look at the third tab down here, we've got parameter sets. The parameter sets include parameters and actions. So if we looked at, say, polar stretch, this will be using a polar parameter, and it will also be using a stretch action. So polar stretch here will be using a polar parameter with a stretch action. Same here, linear stretch would be using a linear parameter and a stretch action. Also with dynamic blocks, we can add constraints. We won't be looking at constraints in dynamic blocks today. We'll be looking at parameter sets, actions, and the parameters. Okay, so if you're familiar with AutoCAD, when you stretch a option, run the stretch command, you go around the object and place a window. Then you stretch in the direction that you want. If we were to stretch this item here, we want to go directly north or orthogonally up the page. We don't want to go on an angle or anything like that. So we're going to actually use a linear parameter rather than polar. If we were going to use a polar parameter, that will allow us to stretch in this manner. So we can stretch it anywhere around and we really have not a lot of control. We can just move that around. If we go linear, it's going to force it to go north or south. For this, it's an easy linear stretch. So we're just going to use a parameter set in this instance, and we're going to go linear stretch. So we want to stretch from the insertion point up to this point here. We want to go directly up the page. So I'm going to click in there, and then I'm going to just place that parameter. This is the parameter here, and this is the action that's been added. We can change the parameter name by just double-clicking on it and renaming, or pressing F2 and renaming that parameter if we want. And we also have this control here. This grip here is the control that we use for stretching. At the moment, there's nothing associated with this stretch. If we have a look at this button here, this button is related to this grip. You'll see this button here has a name of stretch, and it's also got a little exclamation mark in there with a triangle. This states that there is an issue with this setting. What we're going to do is we're going to create a selection set. To do so, we're just going to right-click on this button here, and we're going to go Action Selection Set. We're going to go New Selection Set, and we're going to go around the things or the objects that we want to stretch. So we're just going to put a window around here. It's now asking me to select the objects to stretch. Those objects that we need to stretch need to encompass this corner here, this corner here. So as you know, with the stretch command, we need to pick up the endpoints of the objects to be able to stretch. If we pick up just midpoints, it'll do a move rather than a stretch. We also want to pick up this grip here. The reason we're going to pick up this grip here is that it will stay in the same horizontal location as this line here. So we're going to select objects now. Going to go around normal stretch selection or normal selection set. So go from right to left, do a crossing window. Going to click on OK. Sorry, going to click, and then we're going to press Enter, and that closes that selection. You'll see that the little triangle has gone off here. And if we click in here, we can actually see the area that we're selecting, and it's also showing us the items that are selected in our selection set. Once we've added one parameter or action to the thing, there are some buttons up here on screen. So this is the block editor ribbon. We've got close block editor over on the right-hand side, and we've got test, save, and edit on the left-hand side. If we click on test block, it will take us back into the block editor interface. However, it doesn't send us back to normal AutoCAD. It keeps us in this environment and allows us to check our block to see how it's going with our changes that we've made. So you'll see on the block here, we have our insertion point. That insertion point stays as it was. When we move it around, you'll see that this little grip here that we created goes with the block, and it stays in the same location. If we click on this grip, you'll see that we can slide it up and down. We can't slide left or right because we're doing a linear stretch. If I had done a polar stretch, we could have gone out to whatever angle, and we can stretch in any direction. That's the reason I chose a linear stretch. So I'm happy with that movement here. I'm going to click on Close Test Block. And I'm going to now stretch from this area through here. So the stretch area that we're going to choose is this window here. We're going to stretch from the origin again, and we're going to do a linear stretch. We're going to pick the origin point, and we're going to go to this point here. We're going to put it at the same point, and the grip is placed here on the end. We can move the grip around if we want. You know, if it makes more sense to have it placed elsewhere, you can do so. However, in this situation, I'm just going to leave it where it is. You'll see that the action has been placed and there is issues with the action. So we're just going to right-click, action set again, new selection set, and we're going to go around. Sorry, I missed the window then. Going to go around again. And then we select the objects that we want to stretch. So we want to grab the end point of that line, the curve line, and we want to come up into this area here. Press Enter once we've done the selection. Test our block. You'll see that we're testing pretty much as we go along, just in case there's issues. And now the last thing we're going to do on this one is we're going to stretch downwards. Going to do another linear stretch. We go from the insertion point and we go to the end point here, and I'm just going to place that here. Going to right click here, action set again, new selection set, going to go around the objects we want to stretch, and then we'll select the objects to stretch. So the last couple of stretches I've done fairly rapidly, just to show you, because we're just doing the same thing each time. But you'll see here that we can stretch and it seems to remember the things that we are doing. Okay? So if we modify one, the others stay where they are. We're going to close this window now. And the next step, if you recall, on the drawing, we were going to do a flip. So if we're going to continue with parameter sets, and we're going to scroll down to the bottom of the list. Because we're just doing a single parameter and a single action at a time, it makes sense to use the parameter sets rather than going parameter, then applying an action. So I'm just going to go flip set here. Going to choose the insertion point. I'm just going to go straight up the page. I'm going to hold my shift button just so I'm going orthogonal. And I'm going to place the flip button wherever it may be. I'm going to move that flip item up because it's in the same location as the insertion point. The flip control is here. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing as before. Going to go new selection set. Going to select everything and press enter. So rather than with the stretch, with the flip, we select everything. We don't have to do a window around the objects. We can just flip those objects. We'll now test the block. Doing the same things. We'll do our stretches. Takes a little bit to grab the grip sometimes. And then if we do the flip, we should see the whole thing flips over and it retains those measurements that we had. Just move that one in and I'll do the flip again. Sorry if I could select it. So it remembers those settings. Okay, so we can see that we can stretch the objects and we can stretch wherever we want. You'll find that with this one here, we can actually stretch backwards and it will come back over here. Not always a good thing. However, with the block here, we can actually add some controls to this stretch here. We can also do controls with this one and down here. However, we're just going to concentrate on this one here. I'm going to click on Close Test Block. My narrowest driveway that I want, I'm just going to do a distance. So my narrowest driveway that I may want may be, say, 2 meters wide. Actually, we might make it 2.5. And maybe our widest one would be, say, 10 meters. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on the actual parameter, which is this one here. Just move that out of the way a little bit just so you can see. So we're going to click on this parameter. We're going to bring up properties. With the parameter selected, so we've selected the linear parameter, you'll see down here under value set, we've got distance type. At the moment, distance type is set to none. In here, we have the options of adding a distance type to choose from. We could do incremental, and we can set an incremental distance. Say, we might only want to step 0.1 meter across. So you can see on screen that we have these steps have appeared on screen and they will go to infinity. If I was to test this, so just to show you, I'm just going to test this block now. Going to click on the button here, then click on this one here. And you'll see that those buttons, those marks appear on screen. If we zoom in, it will snap to those lines. We can also come back here and it will snap to those lines that are in here. I'm going to close the block again. I'll zoom in just so it's a little bit clearer. I'm going to click on distance again. We've got distance type set as incremental. The increment is 0.1. The distance minimum. So our minimum width we might want for our crossover may be 2.5 meters. And the maximum width of our crossover we might want as 5 meters. So if we set those, you'll see that the figures have changed. So when I stretch, I should only be able to stretch back to this point. And when I stretch outward, I should only be able to stretch to this point here. To test that, we're just going to click on Test Block. Select the block and then click on this one here. And as we zoom in, we get those figures, and then it goes to the maximum it can with those increments that are being provided. You'll see it's slightly off line. It's because of my drafting to start with. It wasn't drawn exactly on the point. But if you need controls, you can add those controls. So you've got incremental. It's going to go close test. If we select this again, you've also got list in here. So you might have certain widths that you want, and you could set those settings in there. Okay, so once that's created, we click on Save Block. And then if we close the block editor, we should now have this block in our drawing with those controls in there. We can flip. We should be able to stretch and stretch going the other way. Okay, so that's very, very basic stretching of a dynamic block. We're going to get a little bit more complex now. And we're going to look at drawing a sleeper in our drawing. With this sleeper, we have a sleeper that has a fixed height. That fixed height is 0.45 metres in height. We've got posts that go up the side, and they are a fixed width of 0.1. We've also got piers at the bottom. They are a fixed width. However, the depth of the piers can stretch. We've also got the sleeper. We should be able to stretch the sleeper upwards and also the posts upwards to wherever we want. With this sketch here, I've put the sleeper. We're going to array the sleeper and we're going to stretch the post to match. With the piers, we're going to add visibility, and we're going to add 4 different visibility states of left only, right only, both on and both off. This will make sense as we see our dynamic block. Also, with the pier, we need to label the depth of the pier, and we only want the choices to be 0.65, 0.9, 1 metre and 1.2. So we're just going to go ahead and do that. We're just going to go into AutoCAD. I'm going to go back into the same drawing. I'm just going to change my view to my retaining wall. And this is the image that we were just looking at. So I'm just going to make a block. That block I'm going to make of this area here. So I'm just going to copy this over to the side. I'm going to get rid of these. I don't need this stuff in here at the moment because I know what they are. Okay, so this object here, we're going to make into a block. So we've got polyline here, a polyline here, a polyline for the sleeper, a polyline for the post, another polyline for the other post, and we've also got a dimension placed here. That dimension, I've turned off the dimension lines, and I've also turned off the extension lines. So with a conventional dimension, so here, I'll just copy this one across. So all I've done with it is select just off, and there we only have the text. And you'll see that if we modify the dimension, it will update with the particular dimension that's shown. Okay, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rectangles and 2 dimensions placed in here. Going to create a block. So I'm just going to use the same command as previously. I'm just going to use the block command or the create command. I'm going to just call this RW for retaining wall. The insertion point, I'm going to go mid, and I'm going to select those objects. So with this as it is, what we're planning on doing is, say with a long section, we have a retaining wall that may be shown on a long section. With a retaining wall or this here, we might have to move our items around, copy them, change elevations, and have different quantities of the array, of the sleeper. A dynamic block will allow you to do all that in one block. So what we're going to do is we're just going to select, right-click, and we're going to go Block Editor. And this will bring up our block editor once again. To start with, we're going to do a stretch of this area through here. So encompassing those areas, we're going to stretch upwards. So we're going to do a parameter set again, and we're going to go linear stretch. Going to go from this corner to this corner, and I'm just going to place that over to the left. We now need to provide the items to action. So we're just going to right-click, action set, new selection set, and we're going to go around those objects here. We're going to select the area that we want to stretch. So we're going to encompass the tops of the posts, the top of the sleeper, and also the grip. Press enter after that, and that closes that action. Going to test. And then when we click on the button here, you'll see it's actually dragging the post upwards and the sleeper. I'm going to go through a few different steps here just to show you as we go through what I am the reason for this. So you saw we stretched up and we got the post and the two posts and the sleeper. What we're going to do now is we're going to right-click, action set, and we're going to modify the selection set. We want to remove the sleeper out of the selection set. So we're going to press on enter. We want to keep the group or the selection area the same. So that needs to be the same. And now we're going to click on remove here. We're going to remove the item here and close. Okay, so I won't do a test on that. That's just removed the sleeper, this item, out of the stretch. So now the stretch will only stretch this one, and it will stretch this item over here. If I click on here, we should see that the highlighted items are the posts and the grip. So what we're going to do now, we know we've got parameters and we've got actions. We're just going to add an additional action to this parameter here. We're going to add an array to this one. So it's asking us to select the parameter. We click on here. And now it's asking us to select the object. So I'm just going to select that rectangle. The distance between columns, if you recall, the sleeper width was 0.45 in height. So the spacing will be 0.45. Now we're going to test the block. Click on test block. Going to select the block, and I'm going to use that grip, and I'm going to stretch. You will notice as I'm stretching, I'll just zoom in a little bit. We can see our posts are stretching. Then we get to 450, and our sleeper will array upwards. Okay, so we've got that. It isn't what we want. We want that point to be the same point as this here. To do that, so I'll just bring this back just to show you what's going on. I'm going to close the block editor. With our properties, we're going to click on distance, distance 1. We might change its name. We might just call it stretch and array, just so it's got a different name in here. But we've got this one set. So our distance type in here, we've got none. What we want to do is we want to go incremental or increment. Distance increment will be 0.45, which is the width of our, sorry, that shouldn't have gone there. The increment will be 0.45. Minimum distance will be 0.45, and the maximum, we might just set that as 10 meters. Press enter, test our block, select our block again. We're going to drag that grip up again, and you'll notice that the post is not changing anymore. However, when we get to the 0.45 setting, you'll see the post is matching the array. You'll also see on the left-hand side, it's stating the distances that we're stretching. So at the first one, it's 0.45, next one, 0.9. So it's just adding 0.45 at each stretch. So I'm happy with the way that is operating. We're going to go back and we're going to add some additional controls. We now want to stretch, run the stretch command. We want to stretch over this way now. So it'll be linear again. We'll go linear parameter set, and linear stretch. We're going to go from the insertion point, that's mid here, and mid over here. And we might just go to this point here. Let's drag that out of the way a little bit. So this is our control here, and this is the settings that we need to enable. I'm going to right-click, action set again, new selection set. Going to go around the pier, and then we're going to select the items that we want to stretch. Press enter. We're now going to test. So we've got the upwards stretch, make sure that's still working okay, and then we've got the right-hand stretch. All is going well so far. We might want to set that to a minimum distance minimum, so it doesn't go less than a certain distance, so we can only make it 1 meter and wider. So when we test, we'll grab that grip once again, and we can come back here, and we can't go any narrower. That might be the minimum length of our retaining wall, but we can extend it outwards. We'll close the test again. The next thing we want to do is we want to be able to stretch the piers. The piers can only be stretched certain distances. Those distances that were on the image before, we'll adopt those ones. So we're going to go and we're going to do a parameter set again. We're going to go linear stretch. Just going to go on the inside. Doesn't matter where I place it, and it's going to stretch using this grip here. I am going to do both pairs at the same time, just for time reasons. I'm going to right-click here, action set, new selection set, go around the objects we want to stretch, and then we'll select those objects. Close, test our block, and we should be able to drag that down. We have no controls over it, but we can see as we stretch, the dimension is updating because it's being stretched at the same time. With the pier depths, we can only have 0.65, 0.9, 1, and 1.2. It's going to return to our AutoCAD. So with this one here, let's call it piers. And we're going to change the distance type to list. Previously, we used incremental because we were doing every 0.1 millimeters or whatever, 1 centimeter or whatever it was. This time, we're going to provide a list. That list, we've got our default value of 0.65. If we click this button on the right-hand side, it will bring up a window which will allow us to add additional items. So we just type them in the top here, and then we click on the add. Once this is done, we'll see those 4 graduations that are available here. If we click on test, we should be able to drag this down to the first graduation, and it should be 0.9. Second one will be 1 metre, and then the last one will be 1.2 metres. Both sides are doing the same thing, and we should find that we can stretch and we can still array. It's worth testing each time to make sure that you haven't broken any of the other connections in there. So you can see it's building up quite nicely. We've put a few stretches in there. We've put an array in there, and we've forced that array to be a certain distance, and we've forced the stretch to be set to certain distances, and we've also set the stretch on the piers to be at certain distances. What we need to do now is there is also a requirement in the objectives that the piers are able to be hidden or shown. We can show just the left one, the right one, both off or both on. So to do so, we're going to use a visibility state. This is also included in parameter sets. If we scroll down, we can see we have a visibility set in here. I'm going to click on visibility set. I'm going to put it on the edge of the pier, for want of a better place. And you'll see that it's added a visibility item here. So this is a grip for our visibility. And you'll see here it's got an exclamation mark stating that there are issues with the visibility. With the visibility states, these are controlled with this area up here, the visibility tab on the block editor ribbon. If we click on visibility states, it will list the current visibility states in our drawing. At the moment, we're showing both piers. So we might just rename this one to both piers on. So I'm just going to rename. Okay, so that's both piers on. We're going to create a new display set. This one we're going to call both piers off. So once we've set up the visibility on this, this will turn off both piers or stop both piers from appearing. We have options on this panel for different when we create the visibility states. For the reason that I'm leaving the visibility as it is at the moment is because I just want to be able to see these piers and not worry about any of the other options in here. We could have show all existing objects in new state, which is what we're displaying at the moment, or we can hide all existing objects in new state. So when we create a new state, there'll be nothing displayed. I'm just going to leave visibility of existing objects unchanged in new state because I'm just creating these states based on the original one. I'm going to click on OK. Then I'm going to go and create another one. I'm going to call this one left pier only, and I'll leave the visibility state as it was. Another one I'm going to create is right pier only, and I'll leave that visibility state as it is. So I've got both piers on, both piers off, left pier only, right pier only. We can change the sequence of these here. We can move up, we can move down. So move down, move up, whatever it may be. I'll just leave those as they are. My default is both piers on. So I'm just going to double click on that, and that will state up here, both piers on my ribbon. I'm going to click on OK. And this is the display that I want when I have both piers on. I'm going to modify my visibility state by choosing a different state now. And I'm going to choose both piers off. Nothing has changed on screen. However, above here, we have 3 buttons. The one on the right is Make Invisible. The one next to it is Make Visible. And the one next to it, depending upon your current state, if items are hidden in your current state, they will be grayed out. If they're displayed in your current state, they will be shown at full strength. So Having said that, both pairs off, we're going to click on the off button here. And we're going to turn the pairs off. I've chosen the grip as well, because if the pairs are off, we don't really need those controls. And you can see that they've disappeared off screen. If I click on this button here, you can see that they appear on screen, but they're grayed out. Okay, so that indicates that they're not part of this visual state. I'm going to go to the next one, left pair only. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn off the right pair. Go right, sorry, left pair only, right pair only. We're going to turn off the left pair. However, I'm going to leave that visibility, the stretch there, because we want to be able to modify this one over on the right-hand side. I'm going to click on Test a Block. Just check the other items to make sure that they're still operational. Look at the stretches. And now you'll see that we've got a visibility state in here as well. If we click on that visibility state, we've got each of those 4 labels that we created a moment ago. We've got both pairs on, both pairs off, left pair only, right pair only. So both pairs on, they're displaying. If I expand that again, both pairs off, it turns off the pairs and it also turns off the grip. If I select the block again, I can see that grip, left pair only. We should have that control and we can drag it up and down and we can modify that. By modifying this one here, we've also modified the one on the right-hand side and it should be the same depth. So you can see that when we modify that grip here, we're able to modify the right-hand one. Ideally, you would create a separate stretch on this side here and repeat the items over on that right-hand side. So based on that, we're going to save the block. And we're going to close the block editor. Save changes. So we now have this block here. I'm just going to grab the long section. So in here, same sort of thing. If I was to grab this block here, let's go on to my long section. I'll just move these out of the way. And I'm just going to place this block in here. I'm going to put it on the, just take it up to the surface. So we could copy this across, but if I copy this across, I'm just going to, sorry if I could choose the right point. Let's go for the endpoint. Sorry, mid will do. And if I go mid, so here, probably not a very good example. I should have actually gone wider with my, just going to take this one wider. And I'm just going to take that one across. So we can add our things, bring this one up to the surface. It's going to move it up roughly. So here you'll see that we have the blocks. We can change the widths and whatever, but we can see that we've got overlaps with our blocks. So that's why we've got right pair, left pair only. So that allows us to have this one coming through here. So I think we've covered the this one here. We've got that one done. We've got this one displayed. We had the insertion point. We replicated the sleeper, and we've done the stretch downwards here. So that's a very quick overview of basic dynamic blocks. I've only used stretch and the array commands because they were the easiest ones to use, or the most the logical ones for the items that were working. I haven't actually included in the PowerPoint. However, you could actually go through with and just, you might have signs and things like that. You could actually create a block. These are separate blocks. I've actually created a single block here. If I was to double click that and edit it, we could actually add visibility state to this here and get them to be on top of each other. Are there any questions or anything, Shane, that you would like me to address?
Yeah, look, thanks. So, firstly, thank you very much. It's always great to see some practical applications, and I completely agree with you that the most prominent ones that are used are your stretches, your arrays. Your flip is also a good one to do. And the visibility sets. So, you've covered off the mainstays. There are a couple of really good questions here. So there's a question about the parameter sets. Is it easy to copy them within the block and change their selections? So, the idea being you've got a linear stretch. Could you make a copy of that to stretch something else?
You're better off creating a new one. When it comes to the block editor, so you have a parameter that's being placed, and then you add the items. You could copy the parameter across. However, the actions will need to be reapplied.
They get separated.
They'll get separated because it won't work like that. So I would suggest just using a parameter set if it's going to be a straight, polar stretch or, linear stretch or whatever it may be, and using those. If you've got only a single action to be applied, parameter sets are the way to go. And you would see that when I did my stretch here, this one here, when I selected the sleeper, I then removed it from the sleeper because of the way the linear stretch moves. It'll just grab. But you see it's added the arrays. We could actually add additional ones in here. We could actually add, I know it's not really a, we could add an array in, a rotate in here, and it will add a particular action. Yeah. So I would trial and error really, but you can copy your parameters, but add your own actions. And then the actions that you do have, as you see, if you click on them, they are associated with certain areas. We can go through and go new selection set, and you could go through a different area and select it like that. You might have issues with names and the actual links between the parameters and the actions.
Yeah. So the summary is, yes, you could copy them. However,
be cautious.
There's an association between parameters and actions that you get the benefit of with a parameter set, and you would lose that benefit when you copy.
That's correct, yes. If you've created a parameter and you've added the actions yourself, there should be no issue.
Well, Selwyn, thank you so much for that presentation. As I already said, I think it's really informative and a really practical approach to show people, creating some real useful dynamic blocks and the sorts of tools you would run through.